Our family has always been private, and we've cherished our personal lives outside of our father's spotlight. As kids growing up in the presence of a huge personality like Roddy Piper, we all found that too much time around his fame could make you feel like you didn't have an identity of your own. How many times have we each been introduced as Roddy Piper's kid? When you're young, that can leave you feeling like you have no value as an individual. That feeling changed over time. We both came to appreciate what an exceptional thing our dad's life was. His accomplishments were profound enough that they carried through to all his children. They weren't really ours, of course, but even when he shielded us from the spotlight, we shined a little brighter because of him. The older we became, the more of him we saw up close. The more we saw, the more we appreciated just what a mountain he'd climbed to become the man he was. Our family members have remained private people, except the two of us. We went a little bit our father's way. That's why it's us you're listening to now. Ariel headed to Los Angeles in her late teens to pursue an acting and musical career. Roddy worked in L.A. often and would bunk in at her apartment. As his focus turned to film work, they became roommates for a while. Colt got the athlete genes. He fought as an amateur in mixed martial arts through his early 20s, and then trained with Roddy for his more recent pro wrestling career. For many years, Colt had traveled with him to matches and appearances, then worked for him as a bodyguard when he was older. Between us, we met most of our father's friends and colleagues. We sat up late at night with him and heard his stories, learned what interested him when he wasn't thinking about work. But of course we didn't know everything. His youth remained a mystery that he rarely discussed with anyone. We used to joke that the time before he met our mother were his Jesus years, after the gap in the Bible's account of the life of Jesus. Not to get carried away with the comparison, but Dad seemed to have gone through the same thing at the same age. Until his late 20s, what was he doing? We knew bits and pieces, but far from all of it. Our father often felt misunderstood. That was no surprise. He was a generous man who played a villain, a private man who had an enormous public profile, a quiet man who had started riots for a living. He'd had such an unusual life, he was hoping if he shared more of what made him who he was, people would relate to him better. People's misunderstandings really were an issue. How many times were we and our sisters pulled aside and questioned by teachers at school who had watched our father in some crazy storyline on television and been convinced that he must be an abusive parent? They would grill us, and we would assure them that nothing was further from the truth. Sure, his voice could rattle the rafters when we made him cross, but for the record, he never raised a hand. His own childhood, we discovered, had taught him the terrible price of violence against children. There was no way he was going to pass that down to his own family.